Good day, everybody. Zach here with RevZilla, and welcome to another episode of Daily Rider. Our guest today is the V-Strom 800. That is Suzuki's new 800cc parallel twin wrapped up in adventure form with long travel suspension, a 21-inch front wheel, and an MSRP of $11,000. So this is an all-new model along with the GSX-8S that we tested earlier this season on Daily Rider. And with new models come lots of new questions. This one in particular, because the V-Strom name is famous and popular, goes back more than 2 decades now. So the real big question is this new bike a continuation of the V-Strom fame, or is it something new and different and modern from Suzuki? And I suppose, as usual, there's really only one ride to work that'll tell us for sure. Let's go, everybody. Okie dokie, everybody. V-Strom 800DE. Before we get going here, as usual, friendly sponsor reminder. This episode of Daily Rider is brought to you by RevZilla. The YouTube channel that you're watching is owned by an e-commerce company that I work for, that we all work for, to create this programming for you on Daily Riders, shop manuals, CTXP, first ride motorcycle reviews. And the reason we do it is that we hope that when the time comes for you to buy a helmet, jacket, saddlebags, tires, something for you or your bike, that you'll turn to RevZilla. And that's all the sponsor call it is. We hope that you enjoy this programming, and we hope that you enjoy the shopping experience at RevZilla, and you'll buy from us when you can. All right, jumping into the V-Strom 800. We'll start with the engine, as we often do. That is a 776cc parallel twin to the 270 crank. I've talked about that many a time before. Structurally, this bike, the frame and chassis, is sort of similar to the GSX-8S naked bike that we covered earlier this year on Daily Rider, but things have been tweaked predictably. The subframe is a lot beefier because the V-Strom can have saddlebags and more likely to have a passenger, touring stuff like that. The suspension is different, a Showa shock with remote preload here, which is a nifty thing, and then a 43mm upside down Showa fork. I believe it's Showa. Is it Showa? Yeah, I think so. And all this information is in my article, for which the link is in the description of this video. And yeah, that big 21-inch front wheel, which is a little bit of a departure for V-Stroms, which normally had 19-inch front wheels up to this point. It's a modern interpretation of a V-Strom using this new power plant from Suzuki, which we enjoyed on the GSX-8S daily ride. Trying to think what else we need to cover here. It's basically what you see is what you get. It's a handsome looking ADV, I think. This is in this gray and yellow. You can also get it in the yellow and blue yellow championship combo. I forget what it's called, something like that. I think this gray is cool though. It's kind of a liquid. It almost looks matte from afar, but when you get close to it, it's got a little sparkle to it, a little metal flake. It's kind of nice. One thing I'd like to have you keep in mind while we are here for later in the episode is the single piece seat. We'll talk about that briefly when we talk about the seat. And then this distance here from the fork, from the handlebar to the windscreen, from the sort of front of the cockpit as far as the rider's concerned, to the dash, and to the front of the actual motorcycle, which is a little bit larger than I was expecting. And we'll talk about that when we talk about wind protection and ergonomics. Okie doke, everybody. I think we're good here. We can switch it on and start it up. It's nice big TFT dash, which I like quite a bit. We'll talk about that more. And the old single push start, which is getting to be a Suzuki trademark. I think we're ready to go. I'm sweating through my gear here. So let's start riding, get some wind in our face, so to speak. Or not even so to speak, literally. All right, specs, everybody. Let's talk about them. I mentioned the MSRP, $11,000. It's actually $11,349, I believe. $11,350 for the base V-Strom, and there is an adventure model as well. While I'm talking about MSRP, which is around $13,000. We'll put it on screen. You get crash bars, you get saddlebags, and maybe another couple other little doodads. Weight on the Daily Rider scales was 507 pounds with a full 5.3 gallons of gas, and the seat height is 33.7 inches. That's what's listed anyway. I feel like it feels lower than that, for what it's worth. I think it feels more like 32.7 or something. It feels much more approachable than a nearly 34-inch seat height to me, for what it's worth. Horsepower wise, Suzuki claims 80 horsepower and I believe 57.5 foot-pounds of torque. 82 horsepower, 80 horsepower. The basic specs are in the description of the video as usual, but you already knew that. So yeah, none of the specs are really big standouts, I don't think. About as much gas as you would assume, about as much weight as you would assume, about as much power, about as much dollars. From a spec sheet perspective, it's not a surprising motorcycle, we'll put it that way. And when it comes to sitting on the thing, also not surprising. It is quite agreeable. It's a classic modern adventure touring sort of feel. You're sitting nice and upright, nice wide seat, foot pegs are far enough forward that it's reasonable and comfortable, wide handlebar, nice commanding riding position. It is just the epitome of neutral and comfortable as far as modern motorcycling goes. Not a lot to complain about when it comes to the Strom's riding position, that's for sure. Now, I did mention the single-piece seat when we were in the parking lot a couple minutes ago there, and one of the reasons I wanted to call that out was I'm a little surprised when the V-Strom 800 came out that it did not have a two-piece seat. In other words, the rider seat is one piece and the passenger seat is another piece, because that often makes for a more modular, more adjustable situation. Then you can have the rider seat go, adjust to two different positions, and it's a little bit more elegant to do it that way, I think, because it allows the passenger seat to remain in its own position. And I guess I'm a little surprised V-Strom didn't do that, because I do think that if it were a two-piece seat that could have a substantial difference in height adjustment, high to low, that would be attractive for certain riders, and also just more adjustability is better in this category. All right, fourth gear, let's merge, shall we? Brrr. We're merging. Look at that. Boom. Hey, 75 miles an hour, just like that. I guess that's what 800 cc's gets you. The engine overall is good for merging onto a highway, I think. I think it's actually especially good at merging, in so much as the time I find myself most pleased by this engine is sort of low to mid-range power. It's nice and grunty. It gets itself up to pace quickly. It seems like it's happy. It seems like it thrives in those low to mid-range area of the rev band. All of which is to say, I think it is a little buzzy on the highway. You know what? Let me take that back. It's not buzzy. It's just buzzier than I thought it was going to be, considering the V-Strom's heritage and pedigree and Suzuki's propensity for building smooth sport touring motorcycles over the years, especially now. So we're going 75, 80 miles an hour now, and I got a pretty substantial buzz in the foot pegs. And I would gear it up. I would change the final drive gearing. I'd change the rear sprocket or front sprocket, something like that, just to bring the revs down from 5,500 RPM at this speed to, say, do it in real time here so we get some slowdown. So we got 4,500 RPM. This is dead smooth. This is great. Really comfortable. Nice. Beautiful. Engine's happy. Everyone's happy. I should be clear in saying, though, that is a very petty complaint. It's more present than I thought it was going to be, but in general, the V-Strom is awesome at crushing miles like this. The one thing I will say is the wind protection is, I'm not going to say substandard. Again, it's just less than I was expecting from a V-Strom. Sometimes I talk about how I would prefer wind protection was low enough that it just sort of took the wind off my chest and didn't disturb my helmet. And that's kind of the vibe that I get with this windscreen. It is adjustable with tools, to be fair. I think that many V-Strom owners are going to put a larger windscreen on, and they'll be happy with that decision. Part of the reason I think that the wind protection struggles a little bit is that I think the air is a little bit dirty because the windscreen is so far away. If I'm sitting in the cockpit here, I reach out, my 6'2" frame, my arms, I can't reach the windscreen. I have to lean forward to touch the windscreen. It's pretty far away. And I think if it were back a little bit, the air would be a little bit cleaner that was hitting my body, and that would have worked better in my opinion. But being that I'm not the designer or builder of motorcycles, I assume Suzuki had a reason to do it this way. All right, well, construction zone is never my favorite place to talk about fuel mileage, but we got to knock it out. I don't remember what my fuel number was, son of a gun. You're gonna have to put it on screen. I do remember that I got 200 miles out of a tank on the V-Strom, I do believe. It's a 5.3 gallon tank. It's a fairly efficient engine. As usual, it'll depend on your riding type and your riding style. I appreciate that it's not some piddly little like 4.2 gallon tank and it's like, I have an adventure bike. That wouldn't be appropriate, but it's legit. 5.3 gallons of gas. Will cover a lot of miles with a sort of punchy, relatively low revving parallel twin engine. In that way, like so many others, the V-Strom 800 does deliver. All right, we're back up to normal freeway speeds. In summary, I would be very surprised if you were disappointed in the V-Strom 800's highway or touring abilities. It's a great bike. I'd also be surprised if you were disappointed in the mirrors. Great shape, good placement, pretty smooth. I like it. Good stuff. Right, caught the green light into the neighborhood. And just like that, we go from touring manners to round town manners. And we'll try to get some footless stops in here. I feel good about the footless stop. Oh, I screwed that one up. The V-Strom's good though. It's gonna be good. We're gonna get one or two, believe me. This bike is pretty balanced and pretty good at low speed, especially considering it's a 500-pound fella, you know? Yeah, there we go. That's a nice one. Nice footless stop. The V-Strom does all the things that you want a bike to do around town. Basically, the clutch feel is pretty linear and direct and communicative. The fueling is pretty good. The brakes are good. They're not ultra sharp, but they are positive and they feel just like you want brakes to feel, basically. And that's V-Strom in a nutshell, especially in this environment. As far as the quick shifter goes, I have the same comments about the quick shifter on the V-Strom 800 as I did on the GSX 8S, because it's the same quick shifter, which is that the upshifts are pretty good. The downshifts I don't like so much, actually. Yeah, like second to third to fourth, nice and smooth, like it. When you go down, especially the lower part of the gearbox, it just doesn't feel like there's quite enough auto blip happening, and it feels a little clunky sometimes. I find myself downshifting with the clutch like a sucker. But if that's the worst thing you can say about this bike, it's not that bad. All right, this light usually takes kind of a long time, and I think you can see the dash pretty well. Yeah, the dash on this bike is one of the things that I like the most. It is very, very clean, sort of a faux analog tack up to the on the left side here, which works really well through high contrast. Big speedo in the middle, gear position to one side. That makes a lot of sense. With this little selector over here, it's just like a rocker switch up and down and a mode. And when you tap those, you can select traction control settings. The SDMS, which I think is Suzuki drive mode selector, maybe. 3 different maps there for, you know, A is most aggressive, C is the least aggressive. And then you can adjust ABS. And in ABS, there is, I think there are 2 or 3 settings, plus a gravel mode, which is kind of a nice thing to have on an adventure bike. In general, the layout of the dash is great. The information is presented really well. The contrast is high. It's easy to know where you need to look to find the information you want. It's a really, really nicely done dash. All right, last stop sign challenge. Sometimes I talk about bikes having, we got it. Bikes being kind of like, you know, polite around town as far as how loud or quiet they are. I almost wish, you know what, I'm going to say it. I think I do wish the V-Strom was just a little bit louder. It is so painfully quiet, so just like horribly muted. I can barely hear what's going on, and it sounds nice, what sounds you can hear. I just wish it made a little bit more noise. And I think if it did make just a little bit more noise, the folks around here would still be okay with it. I don't think that it would be intolerable or even bothersome if it was, I don't know, 5-10% more bark out of the pipe, you know? Right, on to Lover's Lane, and we were getting tailgated by a Honda Accord. I'm gonna let them go by so they don't hit me in the tailgate. I don't know where you think you're going so quickly, Honda Accord, but go for it. Passenger accommodations on the V-Strom 800 I think you'll find to be quite accommodating. Like I said earlier about the seat, I think it would be better if it was a split deck situation. There's decent legroom, it's going to be just fine. In my article on the V-Strom 800, which has already been published, as I mentioned, you can find the link to that in the description of this video. I mentioned that I didn't think that the V-Strom 800 was a lot better than a Tenere 700. I said something like that. Someone commented and said, I have a Tenere 700 and my wife hates it because it's a big flat sort of Dakar looking seat, and it's crappy and it's bad for passengers. And I think that that is a fair slice of commentary. I think that the V-Strom is more accommodating for passengers than some other slightly more rugged adventure bikes, and that's worth calling out. So I appreciate the person did that. Okie dokie, into the twisty road section of the Daily Rider route. And here it comes. Here's where Zack talks about how adventure bikes are great on a twisty road. You guys don't understand. The 21-inch front wheel, it works fine. Yeah, you're right. That's what I'm going to say. It's great. V-Strom is great at this kind of thing. It's relaxing. It's easy. Like I said, that commanding riding position, you just feel in control. It's really, really good. The thing that I will complain about, which again is kind of a petty complaint, is I eventually dragged foot pegs kind of easily. I mean, you're cooking along pretty good by the time you drag foot pegs, but it was sooner than I expected for a bike that has something like 9 inches of suspension travel or something like that. It's honestly not something that's usually an issue with tallish ADV bikes, especially ones with 21-inch front wheels, because they're, saw half the ground. Like I said, almost a 34-inch seat height. So it's harsh to say that I was disappointed in the V-Strom for that, but didn't expect it to happen quite as early. That being said, you're gonna be pretty satisfied if you ride down a twisty road on a V-Strom. Handles great. Okie dokie, out of the twisty road and back onto the flat land. One thing that just came to mind that I want to say, what was it? Oh yeah, engine heat. 80 horsepower is not a lot of horsepower, and usually bikes that make a lot of horsepower are the ones that barf a lot of heat onto your legs, The V-Strom 800 does not have a lot of horsepower, and yet I have noticed it on a few occasions that my right calf gets kind of cooked a little bit. It's not horrible, but it's 75 degrees out right now. It could be 20 degrees warmer depending on where you live, and I feel like at that point it might be more noticeable, and again, might be a small complaint, but it's worth noting, in my opinion. Approaching this red light, let's talk about brakes. Really not a lot to complain about when it comes to brakes. I often say that I would prefer a slightly sharper bite from the initial bite in the brake, and I suppose you could say that's true with this bike, but that's not a valid complaint. These brakes are great, strong. I touched the horn by accidente. They're Nissan calipers. They are axially mounted, rubber lines. Nothing special, frankly, but the calibration's good. They work fine. I like them. Right, just about our turn to go here, and when we do, I'm gonna swerve over and not swerve. I'm gonna signal and cautiously merge over this lane. Now we're gonna hit our little jump here, this little root jump. Hey-oo! Oh, the TC light was freaking out for a minute there. Alrighty, coming to the end of the ride, which means answering the question or questions we put to ourselves at the beginning of this episode. Chief among which, if I remember correctly, was, does this bike carry on the V-Strom name in a way that we were expecting, a way that we think is appropriate, something like that. And it is an interesting question because in some ways it's a departure, right? It's not a V-twin anymore. It's a P-Strom, as Spurgeon would say. And it's got a 21-inch front wheel, and it is a little bit more advanced than V-Stroms have been in the past. But at the same time, it really does hold the V-Strom character in its heart, which is function over anything else, simplicity, want it to work well, not a lot of flair, not a lot of jazz hands. So I think that it is a proper V-Strom, maybe less so based on its purpose and more so based on how it actually feels to use. And that's not meant to be a dig. I think the reason that the V-Strom badge and the V-Strom line of bikes is so famous and so popular is because it has this reputation for being so reliable and basic in a way that people want and like. So I think that the 800 DE does deliver. It delivers on what a V-Strom should be, in my humble opinion. All right, let's take an old dirt road shortcut, shall we? I think this is, speaking of V-Strom territory, this is the spot. So we got the Suzuki drive mode selector, like I said, in there's A, B, and C modes. I'm gonna leave it in B. I like B. C is a little too soft, A is a little too aggressive. Poor me. ABS 1. There's 2 ABS settings. Must be traction control where there's the gravel. Yeah, there we go. There's gravel traction control mode. Okay, so let's try TC1 for now. This is level 1. Actually, you know, like, pretty liberal. Letting us have more fun than I was expecting. Let's do gravel mode, which you can do on the fly, which I like very much. Yeah. Gravel mode's fun. Let's a little bit of spin. Appreciate that. Brakes feel pretty good and this stuff. You gotta love the big front wheel over this terrain here. And then obviously if you want to shut it off, you can do that too. It doesn't feel a lot different with it off, honestly. It's such a tractable engine, but we'll leave it off just in case we want to experiment with any other specific maneuvers here on the Daily Rider route that we usually do. All right, let's see if we can coax a wheelie out of this sucker. I think we can. Yo, yeah, hey-oh. that went a little wild. Very bad wheelies. But that's on me. The V-Strom is fully capable of good wheelies. I just didn't do a good job having an off day. It happens to the best of us. Not that I'm the best of us. All right, one more big test here. Backing it in. ABS is not super adjustable. You can dump the clutch and the front brakes are quite good, so that's helpful. Let's try for one more wheelie. Huh. There we go. That's more like it. Yeah. That's more like it. That's the wheelie that the V-Strom 800 deserved. All right, time for a U-turn test. I think the V-Strom will do quite well in the U-turn test, and it's actually kind of a fun situation. We got here 2 parking spaces at the end, so we'll get close-ish to this BMW, but not too close. And then we'll go, boop, I lost it. Full lock left, feet up. Yeah, we got 2, yeah! Within 2 parking spaces. Nice and agile at these speeds, in my opinion, especially for 500 pounds. Doesn't feel maybe as big as it should. Okie dokie. Whew. All right. Successful daily ride, I would say. And in large part a successful motorcycle that Suzuki has built here. Sounds good, doesn't it? I think it sounds great. I just wish there was a little bit more, just a little more noise. Maybe that makes me a bad person, I'm not sure. Good stuff. Thanks for coming along, everybody. That was fun. Now, let's see not what I have to say, but what you have to say. Let's answer some Instagram questions. Okie dokie. First up in the Instagram questions, some bike comparos. This is a big cross-shopping model. I think I want to touch on some of the stuff that we didn't talk about during the ride. First up, Coach Kush 48, who asked, would this be a better daily rider than a KTM 690 Supermoto or Husky 701 for that matter? And how does it compare price-wise with those bikes? Am I in the wrong class? Tiger or Aprilia closer competition? So, lots of questions here, right? It actually does compare surprisingly well price-wise with the KTM 690 or Husky 701 Supermoto, which are arguably, yeah, there's maybe a little bit of Euro tax there. The Suzuki V-Strom 800 pricing is a little more aggressive. Yes, it's a better daily rider than those bikes. I think it's not as sprightly, not as much fun, not as raw, not as visceral, not as light, not as nimble, not as kind of racy or raw. But yeah, in general, it's the seat height's lower, the engine's better on the highway. I think it's better than 690 Supermoto or Husky 701 Supermoto option in general. The other question here is Triumph Tiger 900 or Tiger 850 Sport, perhaps, which is very, very similar bike to this one, or the Aprilia Touareg, which is definitely comparable, smaller engine, but more advanced suite of electronics, slightly better off-road, in my opinion. So that's kind of where it sits in that group. I think the Tiger 850 Sport is actually a really interesting comparison because that bike is, it's arguably similarly poised in the adventure class. It's not extreme, but it's a little bit more of a road-going adventure bike, more so than the V-Strom 800, but not much more so. That 850 is a really, really solid bike. Biggest problem with the 850 is to just get a Tiger 900, but by that point you're spending more money than a V-Strom 800, and I think Suzuki's done a good job being aggressive with the price point. Hope that helps a little bit there, Coach Kush. Next question is from LA Ocean 67, who says, this or Tenere 700, which one is the better ADV? To my eye, in my opinion, the Yamaha T7 is a better adventure bike than the V-Strom 800. Not because it does everything better, because it doesn't, but it does do the things that I think define an ADV a little bit better. It's a little bit more rugged, it's a little bit kind of taller, it's more suited for off-road riding, in my opinion. It's lighter, and I think that those things make a big difference when you sort of add all the little things up. If you want to do real adventure riding, like you're going to spend a significant amount of time on gravel roads, on two-track, on water bars and sort of like bumps and ruts and rocks and mud and stuff like that, I think a Tenere 700 is a better bet. But it is, as we pointed out, the passenger accommodations on Tenere 700 not as good. There are other things that we discussed in this daily ride that I think the V-Strom 800 is quite good at, and maybe the Tenere 700 isn't quite as good at. I think it's an interesting comparison because the T7 is a very simple ADV. That's the thing that it's been all along. There's no frills. It's a platform bike. You buy it, you can do what you want with it. If you want it to be a sport tourer, you can set it up that way. You want it to be a big dirt bike, you can set it up that way. And I appreciate that aspect of the T7, and I think for a true adventure application, it does have the V-Strom 800 licked, in my opinion. Next question is from Twong MP4, who said, I would love a direct comparison to the V-Strom 650 and the Versys 650. I thought it seemed a bit big for me, while the Versys feels just about perfect, but I didn't get to take it on a ride yet. Okay, so one thing to note about the Versys 650 and this bike is the weight is almost the same. I think a Versys 650 is 503 or something, 505, whatever, and this is 507. They're the same weight. Essentially, this bike has a bigger engine, it has a bigger front wheel, it has some nicer components. I think the dash is better, for example. But as a sport touring bike, I think the Versys 650 is better. The factory luggage is excellent. Not that the luggage that you get on the Suzuki is bad, but the Versys 650 just has so many things. It has the remote preload, as does the V-Strom. It has a big gas tank, even bigger gas tank. It has better range. It has the TFT dash. It has an adjustable windscreen. It has a smaller engine, but that engine is zingy and playful and fun. And I think objectively worse, but in my opinion, more exciting and playful. And I think if I was going to pick a sport touring bike, I would just get a Versys, because if I don't care about the 21-inch front wheel, I don't care about the actual adventuring, then that's the direction I would go. As for the V-Strom 650, we talked about that a little bit. It's a difficult comparison. The V-Strom 650 is not being eliminated by this bike, so says Suzuki, but it's hard to see why you'd get a V-Strom 650 instead of this, other than to save a buck, I suppose. Okay, enough bike comparo questions that we answered there. Let's move on to some other more playful stuff. Stacy the Death Star asks, does Spurgeon Sr. approve of this model? That is a reference to High Side, Low Side, our podcast here at RevZilla. If you're not familiar, Spurgeon's dad, Spurgeon Sr., is a big fan of the V-Strom. Spurgeon Jr. said that he thinks that this bike is... actually, I can pull up the text message, right? What did he actually say? Spurgeon Sr., according to Spurgeon Jr., says, as long as it's wearing the V-Strom name, he approves. He is a Strominator through and through. Okay, last question is from Polish Bat Van, who says, what retro TV star do you pair with this bike? Ooh, that's a fun one. What retro? I think what this person is reaching for, Polish Bat Van, is reaching for like, oh, it's the Mr. T of adventure bikes, or Lou Ferrigno, or I don't know, like something. I'm not really a retro TV person, so I'm taking a different direction. I'm going with what Simpsons character, which is sort of a retro TV thing, right? Simpsons has been on for 30-something years. Which Simpsons character is this bike? I'm taking your question in a slightly different direction. I apologize. I think the Suzuki V-Strom 800 is arguably the Principal Seymour Skinner of motorcycles. If you're familiar with the Simpsons, Principal Skinner is an upstanding citizen, pays his taxes, has a good job, puts up with all sorts of berating from his colleagues and his peers, but at his core is a good person, is doing basically everything right. He gets a position that he's in is one where he fields a lot of hate, you know? The point is, the Suzuki V-Strom 800 is an upstanding citizen. It is good at many, many, many things. If it's one thing that it is struggling with, in my opinion, is carrying that V-Strom badge, right? All of my complaints, the complaints about the wind protection, about the vibes on the highway, about, the seat. Anytime I came up with something, I kept saying, it's hard to complain about that, right? The reason I feel compelled, I feel okay complaining about it is because it's wearing that V-Strom name. It feels like it needs to hold itself to such a high standard. It should have cruise control and it should have heated grips because it's a flippin' V-Strom. Are you kidding me? But ultimately, foundationally, it is quite a good motorcycle. Just like Principal Skinner is a good man. All right. That's enough answering questions for now. Stick with me. We'll put the sucker on the Daily Rider leaderboard. Okie dokie, everybody. Welcome inside RevZilla West and the mighty Daily Rider leaderboard. Starting to fill up here with motorcycles, which is good. We've got the Suzuki V-Strom 800DE in the hopper, ready to go. What are you seeing on here that can outperform it? What do we see here? Z650 RS, Triumph Bonneville T100, Suzuki GSX 8S, Suzuki SV650. At the top of the Daily Rider leaderboard is a V-Strom 800 better than an SV650. The V-Strom doesn't make me smile in the same way an SV does. But you know what? It's better. It's the new king. It's the new king of the Daily Rider leaderboard. It's a great Daily Rider. It's really, really good. It's punchy. It's smooth enough. It's luxurious enough. It's comfy. I don't think you can take any of the motorcycles on this list and tell me that for any person that you don't have any idea where the person's going, what they're doing, who they are, how much money they have, whatever, that a V-Strom 800 isn't the right choice as a blanket, good, solid, best daily rider. It is. It just is. And it's a bit of a trope, right, that there's always adventure bikes at the top of the Daily Rider leaderboard because they're versatile, they're good. They're good engines, they got good technology, they got comfort, and they got sporting capability. I don't make the rules. Adventure bikes are good. I have a piece of me that's sort of like, it maybe doesn't feel quite right to put the V-Strom 800 at the top of the Daily Rider leaderboard just because it doesn't quite resonate with me. But I don't know, I try to be objective and I try to be reasonable and I try to pass along advice that I think will help the most people in these situations, and I think that this is the result at the end of the day. So there you go, V-Strom 800 at the top of the Daily Rider leaderboard, followed by two Suzukis. It's a Suzuki lockout of the Daily Rider podium with the SV650 and the GX 8S. I've said it before, I'll say it again. We at RevZilla here, myself, Spurgeon, especially on High Side, Low Side podcast, we've done some dogging of Suzuki, and what are they doing? All three podium places on the Daily Rider leaderboard for 2023, which means we should probably do some other motorcycles at this point, right? Other than Suzuki. Suzukis are covered. In fact, they're too covered. So stay tuned for more Daily Riders in the future. We'll do plenty more different machines in the rest of 2023. I can promise you that. And in the meantime, hope you learned something. Hope you had fun. See you next time, everybody. That Honda Accord's tailgating that car now, too. The tailgaters. You're a tailgater. I see you, tailgater. You must be in a rush to get to 7-Eleven to buy a Slurpee. Or perhaps the mini donuts. time is it? It's almost lunchtime? Not even close. Son of a gun.